Welcome to Resilience Talk, hosted by Paul Spencer of Second Nature Solutions. Let's dive in.
You know, ownership is not for everybody. So we're talking about the ownership series today, but there's some of us who would not enjoy owning an asset, especially something like a business. It's too complicated. It's too stressful. I don't get it. I'd rather just go to work. I enjoy the job that I have. I enjoy the people I work with. I enjoy the things that I do. And I don't want the extra added pressure and thought process, the extra knowledge needed in order to run the business as well. And I think that that's okay. And that's a given. That's a fact. So there are lots of people who enjoy the dream of owning a business. But once they get into it and they start to understand the thousands of steps in order to do that, they tend to resort or revert back to the comfort of their own work lifestyle, which is not a bad thing. You know, I used to teach a class here in Cincinnati for entrepreneurs, and these were for people who had really never even owned a business or had created any kind of entrepreneur experience, but they had ideas. And that course was over a course of 9 weeks, and a lot of it was really digging into the idea. Having to understand costs of goods sold, having to understand the price ratio and the expense ratio, and how are you going to actually make money? If you sell this thing for $10, what's your profit? If you sell it for $100, what's your profit? Who's your ideal customer? All of those things over the course of, say, not even halfway through the 9 weeks, you could just see, you can sense that this is a lot. My idea, which is, for the most part, good ideas, don't even pass the muster of making a business around it, or my idea is too complex. I don't know how I could get money, or just like what I said before, the complexity and the knowledge and the back office pieces in order to get this thing to run is just too much for me. And that's okay. And the reason why I bring this up is because that ownership is a unique thing. And it takes unique people to go ahead and dive in, create a business, run a business. So there's another concept called the entrepreneur versus the intrapreneur. And the entrepreneur is that visionary who starts something from scratch. They take the idea, they have the drive, they have the initiative, and they're really risk tolerant. They're very risk tolerant. They're willing to step out there and lose. They are more than willing to lose. Do they accept losing? No, they do not accept losing. And that's where the drive comes in. And those people are very good at what they do. They can drive the business through. And those are typically the founders of these family-owned businesses. That's who they are. The second generation, what I've come to find, are the intrapreneurs. And the intrapreneurs are still very open-minded, very innovative, but they don't really have the desire or maybe even the personal makeup to go start their own thing. They're not going to start it from scratch. They may not have the drive that mom or dad had, and they may not have the makeup for it, but they're really good succeeding their mom or dad, or maybe aunt, uncle, right? Coming in and taking the president's seat and really growing the business, really innovating the business. And they're really good at that. And that's an intrapreneur. So I think that's also interesting to be thinking about, as well as yourselves and those around you, your friends and family, sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, that to have that in mind. Some are geared for owning, some are not. Some are geared for founding entrepreneurs, and some are geared for innovating and taking what's already there and innovating and compounding on top of that. So anyway, thought that was a helpful context for what we're talking about with the ownership series. And we're in the middle of, we're on the back end of the evaluations that we've been talking about. There's 8 of them. We're going to be talking about the 6th one today. And just as a review, we have financial performance, growth potential, key dependencies, recurring revenue, right to win, corporate structure, key management, and owner involvement. So last week we talked about the recurring revenue aspect. Today we're going to talk about right to win. And right to win is essentially, the phrase is, how well differentiated in the business is the business from competitors, right, within your industry. And basically what that means is, how well known are you in your industry, and from a quality perspective, from a relational perspective, that they're going to pick you versus somebody else, right? And so one of the easy ones to think about with that is Coke, right? We all know what a Coke is, but sometimes we say, do you have a Coke? And really what we mean is, do you have a soda, or do you have pop, right? I know that's a whole thing, soda or pop, right? And so Coke is well differentiated, has a right to win. It's probably much easier to go and sell a Coke product than it is a different kind of soda product. And those are different markets, right? So anyway, when we're thinking about right to win from a buyer's perspective, having that differentiation adds value to my asset. And so I tend to think about this as a blue ocean strategy. So if we think about when we're talking about recurring revenue from last time, I like the divergent thinking. When we talked about all those different categories, consumption comes to mind, organizational comes to mind, licensure. All of those things are more divergent thinkings because you may not be in consumables. You may not be in a traditionally licensing industry. But when you throw those things all on the board and you put those ideas together, you may be able to find something that's a consumable or something that we can license, or both within our industry, within our products, within our services. So this is very similar. Blue Ocean Strategy is another divergent thinking tool, series of books that are out there. I think they're very interesting. But when we're in a blue ocean strategy, which basically says that, and we'll use Coke again, as a beverage industry, everybody's over here and they're selling 6-packs, they're selling 12-ounce cans, they're selling them in the grocery store, they're at a certain price. That's the industry. That's what they would call the red ocean. That's where everybody plays. Blue ocean says, can I sell them as liters, right? Can I sell them in smaller sizes? Can I sell them in bulk? Can I find a market that is not already existing within the red ocean? So you can play with all the factors there. There's price, there's convenience, right? There's size, there's accessibility. All those different things start to play out, and you might reduce the cost. So let's say you're a premium brand over here, and this happened actually, I think, with Revlon, with P&G. They had a high-end brand, and I could be wrong with actually brand, but it's just a makeup brand. And they started putting those more into, say, Walgreens and CVS at a lower cost, lower price. And what they did is they changed the market it was in, and so more people would buy those. And so that's a blue ocean strategy. So anyway, you can start to think about how I play the game a little differently than my current industry, my current competitors, or what the buyers in my industry tend to think of, and I'll do it a little differently. And why I'm going to do it a little differently is because they actually want or would prefer the different way of engaging, the different way of purchasing than what's in the traditional industry. So anyway, blue ocean strategy. There's reputation, right? So you don't have to be Coke. You can still be a small business, but have a great, excellent reputation within your industry and within your customer base, and they like you, right? And that's the customer experience part as well. So you have a high reputation. You may have an awesome customer experience that is much different than the current industry or the standards of the industry, and that gives you a right to win. There's a lot of around innovation, which can give you some right to win aspects, which is, hey, we're moving the ball, we're doing things a little differently, and it's matching up with the market in a better way than the way we used to do things, right? These are all different components of Blue Ocean strategy. So do you stand out? I think this is also very interesting. I have a friend up in Calgary. He's a sales coach. His name is Sean Casemore. You would enjoy him. I recommend you look him up. He's got awesome, really cool clips, especially for the sales folks out there, on different sales messaging tactics. It's really good. He does a really awesome job. Anyway, he says this, and I'm going to read it. Most salespeople leave the same impression as everyone else. They're polite, they're pleasant, but they're also forgettable. And then he asks, are you forgettable? And I think that's really interesting. And he has a way of thinking about, no, it's not saying we're not polite and we're not pleasant. Doesn't mean that we go in rude and obnoxious, right? But you have to differentiate yourself from your customers, from others, from just people, individuals, so that you're not forgettable, especially in the sales side, but also just as a brand and as a business is if you walk in the room and they like being around you, you're polite and pleasant, but you haven't left them any value or any reason for them to remember you, then the question is are you forgettable? Do you stand out? So when we think about other right to win, there's IP, which we think about processes. So when we have our processes in place and the way we do things, that has high value to the buyer. It's well established, well known, transparent, and reproducible. Meaning, I could come in, own the business. I have confidence that the people currently working there and the people I'm going to bring in could run the business because of the maturity and the well-documented processes that you have. When we think about culture, that's also an IP. So you may have a unique culture that would add value. You could have suppliers, unique supply chain management, or just unique supplier relationships. And then, of course, brand. We've already talked about Coke, but right when you talk about Apple, when you talk about Dell, Microsoft, Coke, Kleenex, Kroger, P&G, right? These are brands. They're well-known brands, and just the name itself leads to right to win. When we think about, I want to go back to processes real quick. The value in a process that is well established versus one that's not is night and day, right? So if you have a business that is running fairly well, but as a buyer, if I'm coming in and you can't quite explain it to me or physically show me how it works, then I'm gonna reduce the value of your business because it's gonna be much more difficult for me to come in, or maybe if I have a president in mind that I want to bring in, or maybe just in general, I'm just gonna buy the business. I'm not gonna switch anybody up, but any one of you could leave because you want to retire, or you really liked the other owner, and now you're going to do something else. There's a lot of risk there if I'm just relying on the people to run the business. Huge difference. Very important. All right. So right to win also goes to stickiness. So we talked a little bit about this with the recurring revenue. Do we have a cohesive ecosystem like what we talked about with the Keurig, right? You buy the machine, you buy the hardware, And then now you buy the consumables, which are the cups that go in. So if there's another type of cup that doesn't quite fit into the Keurig machine, you can't buy those cups, right? You have to buy the Keurig cups. And then Keurig, I would imagine, licenses this particular size, or there's some kind of industry standard, and right? And that's creating an ecosystem. And that ecosystem could be an external ecosystem, which is just what we talked about. It could also be an internal ecosystem, which goes into more software systems. So you could have like an ERP system, or like what we talked about with Epic with healthcare systems. When those systems are in place, those technology systems, they create an ecosystem around them. So you have different applications that connect to them. You have different ways of data sharing between them. And once you have that kind of ecosystem in place, it's very difficult to rip out your ERP and put in a different one. So that's stickiness. You may have partnerships that are sticky. And because we have a good partnership with well-known brands that have good IP, they stand out, they have good innovation, great at reputation, that also adds value to our business, right? Our right to win. Market share, we've talked about that. You could have large market share, or you could have a niche of a market, which may not be a large market share, but that niche is very isolated and very well protected by everything we've already talked about. And because of that niche market, you have a lot of value, a high multiple that comes around that. And then margins. So when we think about multiples, if we're going to talk about multiples, you think about technology. Traditionally in the past has a high multiple because the margins are just much higher. So when we're talking about technology and the ability to sell that ERP or sell that software system, we typically are able to get a 30% margin, maybe even higher, definitely nothing below 20. And that gives us a higher multiple than, say, a traditional labor type business, like say a plumbing company or a HVAC company. Their multiples are typically lower just because their margins are lower. Not only because, but that would be one of the indicators. So anyway, with right to win, it's out of all the ones that we've already talked about, right to win is the most difficult one, right? It takes a lot of time. If you've owned your business for 20 or 30 years and you're wanting to implement these 8 valuations and you're going to work on financial performance, growth potential, key dependencies, recurring revenue, right to win is a long path, right? To be able to build that reputation, to be able to do that blue ocean strategy, to create market share, to create stickiness, right? You can get to work on your IP, which is your culture and processes, much more easier to do that in a shorter amount of time. But this one, you're going to have to take a longer view to get to in order to do well with the right to win. Doesn't mean I wouldn't work on it. And like what we've talked about before, if it's going to take more time, then I want to work on it sooner than later because I need that time and I don't want to run out of time. So anyway, that's right to win. That's the next slot in the ownership series. Next time, we'll be talking about corporate structure. And thanks for listening. We'll talk with you later.